What a Strange Little Colt. Written by Linwood. Chapter 13. The First Choice, Part 1. Monday afternoon. Princess Celestia truly loved the royal gardens at this time of year. Life jostled for room in every corner. Lush grass paths wound between immaculately kept flower beds that boasted everything from red-pink amaranth bushes to burning yellow-orange delilahs to soft white blue-speckled stargazer lilies. Their fragrance barely tinted the air with hints of passing sweetness. Weeping willows swayed in the breeze, their full branches casting wide, generous shadows across perfectly manicured and exquisitely comfortable patches of sitting grass. These days held no springtime chills or autumn winds, even at night, though those cool, easy times were a far cry from the comforting, all-encompassing heat the day was providing her. A hoof-crafted brook gurgled somewhere, feeding the stone-bound pond across the way, where Celestia knew a school of well-fed koi spent their days without a care in the world. She felt a pang of very deep envy when she thought about them swimming about in their water, serene as silk, unworried about the world beyond their next beating. Indeed, the gardens were the most beautiful part of the palace grounds. It was a shame Celestia was currently unable to enjoy them. The alicorn huffed and looked at the smooth blue sky that stretched infinitely over the pond and past the hedge that encircled the gardens. It looked so clean and pure. The afternoon was growing old, but she still had a while before she would need to lower the sun and raise the moon. More than anything, Celestia wanted to go for a flight, to soar above Canterlot and be free from it all for just a little while. But her shoulders felt impossibly tight. She couldn't hold her head quite as high as normal. Her chest ached with each heartbeat. Luna. The flight would have to wait. The white mare yawned and rubbed her eyes and the bags beneath them with her fetlock. They ached in their sockets, begging for rest that Celestia could not give. She sighed, grateful that for once, no pony was close enough to see her so disheveled. No gold clung to her hooves or weighed down her head. In fact, she hadn't donned her formal wear for quite some time. Her mane, while still ethereal and magically buoyant, floated a good deal lower than usual, and her stylist would have a fit when she saw the state her coat was in. But all of that could wait too. There was a situation at Huff. Celestia sighed again, but not in relief. It's time I check up on Luna. I've spent too much time away from her. She thought about writing Twilight again for the upteenth time today, but once again, considered the fact that her student could look after herself. She had been groomed to do exactly this sort of thing after all, and asking for status reports every 20 minutes simply wouldn't do. Get a hold of yourself, Celestia. The mare rose to her hooves with a groan, stretched her legs in a very unroyal fashion, and turned away from the garden's beauty. But as she began to make her way towards the palace's gold and ivory towers, a strange, near-inaudible noise broke through the brook's gentle babble. She froze, one hoof held in the air, and swiveled her ears, waiting for the sound again. A moment passed, and then another. And right as she started to convince herself that she hadn't heard anything, there, a slight rustling and something else. Celestia didn't need to solve this problem. She had at her beck and call over 100 guards in this wing of the palace alone. It would only take a moment to direct one here as she made her way back to Luna's bedchambers. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was her lack of enthusiasm to return to the torturous storm of stress and worry that had consumed her last few days. Or maybe it was just plain curiosity. But Celestia set her hoof back down on the path and as gently as she could, and stood perfectly still, listening for the rustling again. Another rustle. Her ears locked onto it this time. It came across from the flower beds. She began to trot towards the sound, keeping her ears pointed straight at the mystery. Another rustle. The snap of a twig. A little further to the right, closer to the palace. The mystery was on the move. Her curiosity had been piqued before, but now the situation had her full attention. Her voice of reason shouted that it likely came down to a squirrel or rabbit in the bush somewhere, but she pressed onward. Now she was past the flower beds and the willows. The only thing left between her and the hedgerow on the garden's border was the stream, and it certainly wasn't coming from there. Another rustle, much clearer and louder this time, and a high but quiet voice. "Ow, stupid branch." A foal. Celestia had heard foals' voices of all kinds over the centuries, and this one could belong to no other type of pony. She tilted her head. What was a foal doing in the royal garden's hedge wall? Perhaps a game of hide-and-seek gone wildly wrong? Despite her exhaustion, the mare couldn't help but to raise her head and perk her ears.
"What in the world?"
Celestia thought.
"Well, it's not every day a foal unknowingly breaks into the palace."
She held her breath and began to sneak up on the rustling, walking as lightly as she could. The grass swallowed her hoof steps perfectly, masking her approach right up to the face of the massive, formidable, and overwhelming green hedge.
"Such a fucking pain in my ass, walking across half the goddamn city and... my eye!"
The bush growled.
"I swear, these fucking branches!"
Celestia paused. Apparently this foal's parents were not doing a very good job at teaching their child to speak with a clean mouth. Her confusion only grew as the growl became a tired, annoyed chuckle.
"If only those fucks could see me now. Some dick from... nowhere, Pennsylvania, stuck in a baby horse's body, crawling through a goddamn hitch trying to sneak into a stupid castle and to find a pretty pony princess."
The string of utter nonsense threw Celestia for such a loop that a scratched-up Colt tumbled out of the hedge's leaf-stuffed branches caught her completely by surprise. "Ah," he said as his chin hit the grass, his eyes squeezed shut.
"Ow."
Celestia blinked and tilted her head from side to side as she inspected the scratched-up Pegasus foal.
"What a strange little colt,"
she murmured under her breath. Then she spoke aloud.
"Who are you, little one?"
"Yeah!" The little green colt jerked his head and waggled his legs, tangling them up nicely as he attempted to stand. He tumbled back down to the ground with a grunt, and his head popped up.
"Such deep brown eyes,"
she thought. They grew the size of saucers when they saw her, and he smiled.
"Oh, shit! It's you!"
Celestia blinked.
"It's me."
His ruffled little wings flopped around as he rolled, finally untying his legs and getting them underneath himself. He stood with the confidence of a pony who had just been allowed to leave their wheelchair for the first time in weeks. He clearly knew how to stand, but it took a moment for him to remember exactly what that meant. She also noticed he wore a curious pair of leather bracers on his forelegs.
"Yeah, you, Celestia. Man, that's lucky. Goddamn."
He tilted his head and raised an eyebrow.
"You look really tired."
For the first time in a long time, Princess Celestia found herself at the slightest loss. After her mind-boggling moment had passed, however, she rapidly reeled in her confusion and threw it to the back of her mind.
"This is no time to be gaping like a fool."
It was a small thing to refocus herself and don a familiar motherly tone.
"What are you doing here, my little pony?"
She spoke those words softly with all the kindness she could muster, but he jerked as if he had been hit by lightning. His eyes shot up and locked with her own, and in that instant, the utter wrongness of them hit Celestia like a strike to the heart. 1,000 years did not pass without conflict. Not even Celestia could bring about such a lasting peace, and despite her constant efforts to keep it at bay, the mare had seen such times take Equestria in its grips. Those times, long, long ago, did not boast armor made of gleaming gold, polished and shown off in extravagant parades. No, it had been forged from cold, dark iron. In those grim days, Celestia had seen countless souls claimed by the suffering that such things brought. She had seen those eyes in the Pegasus that had returned from battle wingless and the prisoners shackled in iron chains. She had seen those eyes in the displaced as they guided their homeless families to the sides of the muddy roads to make way for her soldiers, turning so that she would not see how their ribs showed underneath their coat. She had seen those eyes in the fold that sat on the threadbare cot wrapped in a thin blanket, shivering and alone, waiting for parents that would never return. Celestia had not seen those eyes in many, many years. But there they were, here and now, staring at her from inside this little green colt's head. He laughed.
Sorry, but you're not one of my little ponies, are you?
His gaze lowered.
No,
He said after a second's hesitation.
I'm not.
Then he looked up again.
But that doesn't mean I wasn't raised without manners.
The colt stepped right up to her, confident as you please, and struck out his little tiny hoof.
You asked who I was. I'm Gabriel.
A strange creature from a place of suffering, made to look like a Pegasus foal. He spoke in an accent she had not heard before, and of places she knew not to be in this world. It didn't take long to put two and two together.
The interloper. Delivered right to my hooves.
A bolt of alarm raced up her spine, and if somebody was looking closely, they would have noticed her eyes slightly widen and wings clamped closer to her body.
Why did Twilight not mention that he was in the form of a foal?
He shifted slightly, nearly shouting for her guards and calling upon her magic right then and there. But she looked him in the eye again and stayed her hoof. Interlopers were never to be taken lightly. But this one...
There's something different about him.
With her revelation locked behind a gently pensive face, the princess extended her hoof.
I am Celestia. It's a pleasure to meet you, Gabriel.
She watched him closely, ready for any kind of magical buildup or attack.
Should he attempt something, he will be sorely sorry.
The colt wrapped his hoof around hers and puffed it up and down once.
The pleasure's all mine, princess. How strange. The others wouldn't have hesitated to take that advantage, but he chooses to shake my hoof of all things.
The momentary thought didn't stop her from making her first move.
I'm sorry to say, but I must return to check on my sister. Would you like to come with me?
The colt blinked. Apparently he hadn't been expecting that.
Yeah, sure.
The mare turned and began to stride towards the palace doors, taking care to walk more slowly so that Gabriel could keep pace.
Convenient.
He motored behind her for a moment before breaking into a trot. The foal had to hurry to catch up to her and walk at her side.
You know, this palace is a lot bigger than I thought it would be,
he said as they approached the massive oaken doors. Celestia smiled as she lit her horn.
You are far from the first to observe that, little one.
She pulled the massive doors open and the two strode into one of the palace's many halls.
I bet.
He craned his neck as they walked, looking all the way up to the ribbed arches that held up the cavernous stone ceiling.
Jesus, that's tall.
The guard that patrolled the miles of the palace hallway certainly noticed her company, but they didn't do anything besides manage to look stoic and confused at the same time. Celestia hid a smile. It wasn't every day she got to lead a strange, unfamiliar foal past legions of ponies whose job description included keeping strange, unfamiliar ponies away.
Celestia, if you don't mind me asking, what's going on with Luna?
It took a good deal of effort not to show any reaction.
He knows that I know.
It appeared the interloper was a little sharper than she gave him credit for. Still, the mare smirked a little at the colt's lack of titles, and she wondered if he knew just how few ponies addressed her as such. All the guards, all the staff, all the nobles, and any normal pony for any matter would have forgotten their own names before they forgot to call her princess. Twilight still did it too, even though Celestia had reminded her many times that such an honorific was unnecessary, and even young Cadenza called her auntie. Though with her plans for that stallion of hers, she'd been rather distant of late. Really, the only other pony to call her by name was Luna, who was slowly dying in her bed at this very moment. Celestia's chest ached, and she began a response with a grand understatement.
She had not been herself as of late,
she said.
We were busy with the rule, and I assumed that her moods were because of a workload stress, and nothing more.
She winced.
I confess, I wasn't nearly attentive enough, and she, well, took matters into her own hooves.
Nicole hummed.
What does the whole soul magic shtick have to do with this?
The issue of the hour. Celestia suspected that she would never truly understand the emotions that had pushed her sister to make such a choice.
From what I can tell, she was attempting to summon a pony she was quite close with, or, at the very least, recreate him. Instead, she severely injured herself and summoned you.
Oh, fuck. Gabriel looked over his shoulder at himself as he trotted and flopped his wings around a bit.
Did he look like this? It has been a long time since I saw him, but no, I believe he was a deep blue. Then why am I green? I must confess I do not know. Perhaps there was something in the spell that decided that best color suited you. Unfortunately, the pony best able to answer that question is currently indisposed. Best suited for me, huh?
Nicole muttered.
That spell had one cruel fucking sense of humor.
Celestia didn't quite know how to respond to that.
So, what? This is all Luna's fault?
The frowning Colt asked a few seconds later.
She forgot to think for a fucking second and pull the royal fuck up? That's why all this happened?
He scoffed.
That's, monumentally stupid of her. Yes, Luna has made a grave mistake,
Celestia said, looking down at the Colt with an arched eyebrow.
But it is one I suspect she has paid dearly over the course of the last 3 days. I will also remind you that you are speaking of my sister.
The Colt shut his mouth. After a few moments of silent travel, he spoke again, his childlike voice filled with gentle curiosity.
So, why haven't you killed me yet?
The absurdity hit Celestia like a ton of marble blocks, and she suppressed a start.
I'm afraid you're going to be more specific than that, Gabriel. You're not stupid, he said. You've probably got a stack of letters from that student of yours all about me, and you're 1,000 years old. I'm sure you figured out that I'm the magical interdimensional monster you're looking for.
He snorted.
For God's sake, your sister's dying and the cure is walking alongside beside you, but you haven't scooped me up and just teleported me to her or something. We're just walking there. What are you waiting for?
Truth be told, Celestia had been acting with caution in the face of an unexpected and thoroughly alien situation. She knew not why Twilight had apparently not seen fit to inform her that the interloper had taken on this particular form, but whatever he was, he appeared not to know the danger of other interlopers had posed in the past, even to ponies as powerful as her.
I suppose I can assume force is an option now.
Still, the admission he understood what his life meant to her only poured more questions into her head.
Well,
Celestia began.
If I had done that, then I wouldn't have been raised with manners, would I?
The Colt barked out a snorting laugh.
No, I guess not. I tell ya, if I was in your shoes, I wouldn't have been so patient. Why did you seek me out, little one?
Celestia said, looking down at the little foal as she walked by her side.
If you knew I could kill you without a moment's hesitation, why would you come to the palace at all?
The Colt studied the tiled floors as they walked.
A mix of things, really. Partially because I was tired of pretending that I didn't know what was going on.
He tossed his unbrushed mane.
That student of yours, Twilight? She and her friends had this clever plan set up to get me to you. It would have worked too, if I hadn't realized what they were trying to do.
Gabriel chuckled a little.
Would you believe that when someone who thinks they locked you in a room sees a broken window, they think you climbed out of it?
The prince refused to let the barest hint of confusion show on her face.
Yeah, they thought they had me all figured out. Not quite.
He grinned at her, and she caught something of a predator's glut in his eyes.
Still though, she really gave it her all to get the job done. And I had an unfair advantage anyway. You should be proud. That's one of the strangest compliments I've ever received. Thank you. I am indeed very proud of her,
Celestia said, trying to sound gracious.
It was pretty fun to slip under their radar, actually. But I guess...
He trailed off into a thoughtful stare. Celestia tilted her head in the gibberish idiom, but she picked up the subtext well enough.
Foiling her plan wasn't really the point.
He paused for a moment.
She thinks I'm some sort of space monster. And I guess she's kinda right in a way. But not the way she's thinking of. I didn't want to have to make her, I don't know, do something stupid. Well, she might have already done something stupid, so I guess something wrong.
Gabriel looked up at her.
Seems to me there's a pretty bad problem that needs a fixin'. I just wanted to make things right, you know? And make them right my way. On that, I can empathize thoroughly.
Celestia thought, nodding as they finally approached the doorway to Luna's chambers. She waved a reassuring wink to the two guards flanking it and lit her horn, pushing the iron-banded doors open, and the two entered.
Well, you certainly have taken the initiative by coming here. That was the idea. Whoa.
The Colt stared wide-eyed at the many candle-lit tapestries and diagrams that adorned her sister's sitting room. Celestia would not have chosen this sort of decor for herself, but Luna loved to display her diagrams for the night sky alongside multi-century-old works of art that proudly flourished the beauty of the night, depicting nighttime landscapes and scenes of moonbeam-lit ponies with exquisite detail. The end-window wall's splendor put the rest of the furniture in the room to shame, overshadowing the meager chairs and tables that occupied the half of the room across from Luna's massive desk. Unfinished drafts and designs still cluttered its surface. Celestia pushed her thoughts on the Colt away, moving toward Luna's bedchamber.
Please wait here a moment, Gabriel. I'm going to check on my sister. It would be wise not to touch anything in this room. Wouldn't dream of it,
he said in an unworried voice while inspecting one of the silver-embossed bracers on his forelegs. Celestia blinked, caught off by the Colt's candor again. She took the passing consideration away and stepped into Luna's room. The candlelight was dimmer here, and when she closed the door behind her, she cast the room into a low, flickering light. The flames threw dim, dancing shadows across the tall, dark walls. There in near solitude, safe from any possible eye, Celestia finally let her shoulders fall. Her head lowered from where she had been working so hard to hold it, hanging low, the tears beginning to fill her eyes. Her mane dropped out of the air and lost its blues and greens, returning to a simple pink and falling across her neck. She felt her tail do the same.
I feel so heavy.
She took another deep breath, wiped her eyes, and walked towards the room's main feature. A massive four-poster bed, carved from dark oak and draped in flowing folds of night blue silk. There, Luna lay, beneath a down blanket embroidered with a beautiful map of her night sky. She looked minuscule in the oversized bed. Her pale blue mane lay scraggled and tangled across the pillows behind her head. One foreleg lay on her covers, motionless, and her chest barely rose and fell with each breath. Celestia sat beside her bed.
Sister, I'm here.
She didn't move.
Lulu, can you hear me?
Her sister took a shallow, shuddering breath. One eye slowly opened and blurrily drifted around before settling on her. Celestia could hardly see the teal in her eyes through its cloudiness. Luna gasped again, twitching her lips, but her melodic voice remained lost.
Luna, I found the interloper.
A smile spread across her face and tears gathered in her eyes. She sniffed and wiped them away again.
Lulu, you're going to be okay.
Luna hissed.
Hurts. I know.
Celestia reached out a hoof and carefully touched its tips to Luna's. Her sister's eyes blearily followed it, and when they met with an almost silent tap, she weakly twitched her own hoof. Celestia smiled and sniffed.
You'll have to wait a little while,
she said.
There's a problem with the interloper. It's not quite what we expected.
The eye swiveled around and met hers again, clouded and uncomprehending. Luna struggled for air. She huffed an unintelligible word.
It's going to be okay. I promise,
Celestia said.
I'll be back soon, just rest, okay? I'll be back soon.
Her sister's eyes remained on hers for a moment, longer before slowly closing. Celestia swallowed a sob and raised her chin, wiping at her eyes once more. Then she stood, forced herself to look away from the still limp form of her sister, and returned to the doors. She paused before them, taking a moment to light her horn, her mane and tail relit with the flash, caught by a magical breeze. Celestia cast a glance over her shoulder to check that they were in order and took a deep breath, making sure her eyes were dry and her head was raised before opening the chamber doors. The Colt had moved, but not by much. He stood nearby Luna's desk, examining it in a respectful distance with a careful eye. Though it huddled away, letting the tapestries and beautifully complex charts of the night sky take the stage, the desk was as much an artifact and work of art as everything else in the room. Hoof-carved great wood embossed with glittering star metal and inscribed with runes for longevity. It was one of the few things of Luna's that had survived her long exile.
How is she?
The Colt called over his shoulder.
She has not improved,
Celestia replied as she strode towards him. Her head felt terribly heavy, and her neck felt incredibly sore. He turned around and fixed a steely look on her.
I'm sorry to hear that,
he said. There was genuine sympathy in his voice, to be sure, but the expectant way he spoke made Celestia believe that the concept of a slow death was no news to him.
How dark.
He walked to her, completely ignored the table and chairs, and plopped his rear down to the magnificent carpet. Then he held up a foreleg.
Do you know what these are?
Celestia raised an eyebrow and seated herself across the Colt, laying her head down to examine the leather wrapped around his limb.
I believe that is an enchanted bracer. Why do you ask?
He huffed.
Yeah, I figured it was magic. I only asked because I can't get the dumb things off.
He pushed at it with his other hoof, and lo and behold, it appeared to be stuck. Celestia leaned in closer, examining the silver patterns on the bracer.
Ah, binding, draining, with an active magic trigger. Very clever, Twilight.
Her knowing eye had followed its swirls and crossings until it found a certain place where the faintly glowing lines met in just the right way. She lit her horn and let just a little bit of magic flow into the pit of the leather.
Try again,
she said. The Colt pulled at the bracers and it slid right off.
Well, damn. Would you look at that?
He muttered and held up his other foreleg.
Please? Of course.
Celestia repeated the process and Gabriel slid the other bracer off a moment later.
Thanks a bunch,
he said, rubbing at the fur that hadn't been trapped beneath the bindings.
I couldn't really figure out what they were for, but I really didn't like that I couldn't take them off. It was my pleasure.
Celestia smiled politely. The Colt nodded his head and coughed into himself.
So, about the whole, Luna dying issue. Sounds like there isn't any time to screw around with. Indeed there isn't, Gabriel,
Celestia said, shaking her head.
Well then, what do you suggest? You are the one who managed to break into the royal gardens after all. And did anybody guess how we managed that?
He rubbed his chin.
We've got a problem to solve here, and I'd rather not die, so I think it's high time you sent Spike a letter telling all of them that I'm here so we can sort this out. Twilight and Rainbow and the others would have regrouped by now. They'll want to catch up.
How did he know about the Dragonfire letters? Had he perhaps seen Spike send one? Celestia elected not to ask why the Colt sounded so familiar with the idea. Instead, as she levitated a parchment and quill from a drawer in her sister's desk, she asked her other question.
Rainbow Dash?
Celestia raised an eyebrow as she began to draw up a letter.
The element of loyalty is in Canterlot too?
Yeah, the Colt said with a grimace.
I should probably bring you up to speed.
On my first reading of this, it did not come into mind that Celestia just wasn't informed that the Colt was, or well, that the interloper was a Colt. I don't know how I didn't catch that on my first reading. Only when I really started recording this, I'm like, well, shit, yeah, she just didn't know. She was ignorant of it, and I wonder how she would have treated the situation otherwise if she knew. But, my speculation aside, I would like to thank my wonderful Patreons that don't speculate at all, and I love them. Every single one of them. Thank you, my tier 1s, Redeemer of Dark, Jason, Chase Lemaster, Lunar Gaze, Hyperling, 8 Day of Night, Starlight Blaze, Night in Game, Dreamless Portal, and Balanced Kindness. My tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, The Animated Ghost, Solus, HGH4, aka Texture, Sword Brother and Mordred, Nocturne, DJMX 2000, Papa Lennon, Can Panzer, Elemental Wolf, and H1 Wolf King. And of course a large thank you to my Titan tiers, User 1842, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and a large thank you to Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so much and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.